Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Labor's Voice. My name is Kent Wong. I'm the director of the UCLA Labor Center, and this is a monthly program that is co-sponsored between the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor and the UCLA Labor Center in order to bring labor and community activists up-to-date news about what is happening within the labor movement, especially during these challenging times of the pandemic. We are very excited tonight to be joined by four extraordinary labor and community leaders. And the focus of our topic is on the fight for immigrant rights. This is a critical time in our nation with regard to the desperate need for immigration reform and to challenge the discriminatory and racist immigration policies which have led 11 million undocumented immigrants throughout the country without rights and without an opportunity to fully participate within our society. We are also holding this event on a time in a few days before May Day, International Workers' Day, that was born out of the struggle of the US working class, but it took the immigrant workers movement to bring the spirit of May Day back to the US working class. And joining us tonight on our program is Teresa Romero, the president of the United Farm Workers of America. Just last month, we celebrated the birthday of Cesar Chavez, one of the finest union leaders in US labor history. And Teresa Romero is carrying on the tradition of Cesar Chavez every day. Here in Los Angeles, some of the most exciting immigrant worker organizing in the country has taken place, including the legendary Justice for Janitors movement. And one of the leaders of that organizing campaign, Rocio Saenz, is with us here. She is an executive vice president of the Service Employees International Union, and she is leading the fight for immigration reform for her union and for the labor movement. Los Angeles is also home to the most robust worker center movements in the country. And with us tonight is Alexandra Suh, the director of the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, who has been forging multiracial unity among workers of the Koreatown community and fighting for justice. And finally, we have Hugo Romero, the political coordinator of the Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, who himself was a car wash worker who supported himself through college. He was a participant in our Dream Summer program, was one of the national coordinators of Dream Summer, and now he is a labor leader in his own right at the LA County Federation of Labor. This year, 2021, marks the 10th anniversary of our Dream Summer program that has placed more than 750 undocumented immigrant youth in social justice movements across the country. It is these Dream Summer Fellows and alumni that fought for and won passage of the California Dream Act, fought for and won implementation of DACA, and have continued to advance the fight for immigrant rights. So I wanted to start the show tonight by showing you a short clip that celebrates one of the cohorts of Dream Summer that places undocumented immigrant youth in the labor movement. So please enjoy this clip from a few years ago from the Dream Summer labor cohort.
The Dream Summer program is an amazing project that exposes youth to experiences with labor unions and community organizations and the movement in general. Students are able to learn more about what community organizations and unions are doing to further the cause of immigrant workers, and the organizations that host them over the summer are able to grow capacity during that time to further the movement.
There will be workers, drivers, and warehouse workers no matter where you go. So your job is to find them. Talk to them. Utilize the skills that we just talked about. Get some facts, get some issues, It's in stories mostly.
We're going to the port to stand alongside the workers that don't have the right to be part of a union to get the benefits that they deserve as workers.
We came to support all the people that are for the ACA, and Representative Steve Knight voted against it.
They allowed us to send one person into the office to deliver appointment notes. I think it was a successful day.
I have had the opportunity to witness contract bargaining between UTLA and LAUSD. I have also gone door knocking to create a base of community members.
My role in the UFCW right now is to support any activities or programming that they have going on. We have anything from how to become a citizen workshops to workshops on family preparedness in case one of the parents gets deported, or clean record clinics with the public defender's office.
UTLA was my very first internship experience. I had never seen myself in a space like this. At first, I felt like I couldn't, or that I didn't belong in an institution like this. It took me a while to understand that as an undocumented woman, as a woman of color, I had not been given those opportunities and that I didn't have those skills for a reason, because I had to live different experiences, but that it was time for me to get those skills. It was time for me to learn whatever I had to learn.
Unions, as representative of workers, allow for there to be the building of power amongst workers. And so right now, the workers that need to build the most power to protect themselves are immigrants.
In moments like right now with the current political rhetoric, we have to be more considerate and be working at the intersection between labor and immigration, because that's where we're going to find power in our movements, by uniting them and being intersectional.
I live the labor movement, and that I am the labor movement, and my mom is the labor movement. I was asked to go up on stage at the UTLA Leadership Conference.
I am here because I struggled through my senior year of high school, thinking I couldn't go to college because of my immigration status. I am here because I had to see my mom work from sunrise to sunset just so my only job could be to go to school.
When I got up in that stage, I told myself that I'm not Stephanie right now, I am my undocumented people. We're here and we matter and we have a voice.
What we've done in negotiations is really been able to address all the articles in our contract. So when we had the two Dream Center interns, Maria and Stephanie, in the room, they were so engaged that when we presented the bilingual proposal, they couldn't stop from speaking, and they raised their hand. And this is in front of LAUSD, and said, if I had the kind of bilingual education program that is being proposed now, it would have made a difference in my life.
So that was a short clip on a Dream Summer, which is celebrating its 10th anniversary at a critical time when immigrant youth are mobilizing to fight for immigration reform. Joining us is Hugo Romero from the LA County Federation of Labor. He was a Dream Summer participant, a Dream Summer fellow, a Dream Summer national coordinator before becoming the political coordinator for the LA County Federation of Labor. So welcome, Hugo, and tell me, what was the experience like in being a Dream Summer fellow and then going on to run the national program?
Thank you, Kent. And let me just start off by saying what an honor and privilege it is to be here with Rocio, Alexandra, and Teresa, powerful women of color leaders, like the folks that started the Dream Summer program, right? A woman of color who brought me into Dream Summer in that first opening retreat. So for background, I was a car washero, Kent. I was in college and I was working at a car wash. And at some point, I thought to myself, I need to get some form of quote unquote professional experience, right? To use my degree, what am I gonna do? This was at a time pre-DACA, where there were not many professional development experiences out there. So I Googled internships for undocumented students to kind of just see what's out there in Google, if anything, just kind of as a last resort, and came up a UCLA program that, piqued my interest, and I applied. And, I got in. I developed a network of other immigrant youth across the country. I found a space with shared experiences that I don't think I had been involved in, with a certain specific strategy and lens. And it was the most incredible experience I could have gone through, just meeting the folks there, the curriculum, and the opening and closing retreats. But most importantly, it was what it connected me to, and that was the labor movement. The video brought back so many memories. In terms of, I just, at the time the video was made, I was coordinating the program, but their stories were very similar to how I felt going through the program, and that I didn't know was living the labor movement until I got involved in Dream Summer. In fact, I was a beneficiary of the work the labor movement have done, and the Clean Car Wash campaign in particular. I received a settlement check for wage theft for the car wash I was in the street as a direct result of the work of the Clean Car Wash campaign. But I had no idea about the Clean Car Wash campaign other than there was people protesting our parent company in LA. I was working in Orange County. And when I came in, it was all my worlds collided, and working with unions in Orange County to build out the UCI Labor Center, and seeing the work that was really done by folks like Tafari Gabre in mobilizing immigrant workers and really supporting immigrant youth organizing in Orange County, really saw, I was able to see what a powerful intersectional movement the labor and immigrants movement are, and the power of organizing immigrant workers. And, it really, I took off. Once I was introduced to the labor movement, there was no turning back for me. It was a place where I could connect my experiences as a car wash worker, as a warehouse worker, as an immigrant, and really combine the two and drive the work that really feeds my soul and drives me, because it's just, it is about me and my experiences, but it's also about our communities and my parents and our families and the workers that to this day continue to struggle, Kent. And so, seeing that video and where the labor cohort is now is incredible. When we started in 2015 and where it's at now, where unions like SAU 721 are getting like 15 fellows every summer, and many of the folks you see in the video and not are now leading in their own respective unions and channeling their same lived experiences as I have, is really a testament to the program, and a powerful and critical tool for the labor movement, an asset really to have these lived experiences and have these skill sets be brought onto the labor movement.
Thank you so much, Hugo, for those inspiring words, and for the work that you continue to do to build a better future for workers and immigrants. Teresa Romero, we're so happy to have you back with us at Labor's Voice. And as president of the United Farm Workers, you have been carrying on the long and proud tradition of organizing farm workers in the United States. At this critical time, immigration reform is back on the table. How does that issue impact your union and the farm workers?
Kent, we have been working on immigration reform for many, many years. And in 2019 and again in 2021, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act passed the House with bipartisan support. And this is just the right moment to do it. We've been working with different labor unions. Rocio is part of this group, where we are trying to move specific bills that have been already approved by the Congress. And we're talking about, of course, Farm Workforce Modernization Act, which would give, and I hate to say the word legalizations, but it would give status to farm workers and their families. We are fighting also for dreamers who have been here contributing to our economy, and we're fighting for TPS recipients. And this is these specific bills are because we have already put them to vote in the House. They passed the House, so now are in the Senate. So now our work is trying to be to get the Senate support that we need. As you know, and as many of us know, farm workers and other workers that all of us represent have are essential workers, have been working during the pandemic, have been risking their lives. Most of us, or many of us, were able to work from home and work remotely and do these things that we're doing right now remotely. But farm workers cannot harvest our foods and vegetables remotely. And they can't, when they are harvesting day in and day out, they don't question if their food is going to go to Republicans or Democrats, to red or blue states. They're feeding all of us, and this is a fight that we've been having for a long time. We are very optimistic. The last 4 years have been very difficult for immigrants. Farm workers have, and I'm sure not only farm workers, immigrant families have been forced to tend their children, what it is that they have to do if their parents don't come home. So just imagine those children at the end of the day wondering day in and day out if their parents are going to come home. It is something that they have earned. It is something that is, farm workers are the backbone of the agriculture industry in our country. They feed us all. And it is important now that we move these bills forward to give the documents and path to citizenship to these people.
Thank you so much, Teresa Romero. My beginning in the labor movement was as a boycott organizer for the United Farm Workers. So your statements mean a lot to me. And I'm so glad that you're lifting up the role of farm workers as essential workers, as people who are doing the day in, day out work to plant and pick the fruits and vegetables that we eat every day. And yet, although they are essential workers, they are treated by corporate America as disposable workers. And I'm also so glad that you lifted up the link between the fight for the farm worker immigration reform initiatives, along with TPS, temporary protected status, along with the DREAM and Promise Act to regularize the status of undocumented immigrant youth. And all of these progressive immigration reform proposals are on the table, and they're not going to pass by themselves. That's why we're here, and that's why we're fighting. I wanted to turn to Rocio Saenz. SEIU played a huge role in the Biden victory, in flipping the Senate, and in mobilizing in critical states to secure this victory. What is SEIU doing now with regard to using that political power to fight for immigration reform?
So first of all, Ken, let me just say thank you so much for your work, your leadership, all what you have done to the labor movement, but for all the movements. And it's just so great to be with in this conversation with Teresa, Hugo, Alexandra, movement leaders, labor leaders who, in this moment just coming and celebrating the life-saving work that workers in America are doing during this pandemic. For us in SEIU, immigration is so personal, one, because 100 years ago, this in 1921, immigrant workers in Chicago, these were janitors who organized for change their working conditions. And just like today, they were immigrants and they were essential workers, but they were not recognized. So we're here right now, and thanks to all the incredible work of the frontline workers, nurses, healthcare workers, who took care of us when we had COVID or when we got sick, to the housekeepers and janitors who are disinfecting hospitals or office buildings. And as we hear from Teresa, farm workers picking our crops here in America, and for all the incredible work that is happening around the country for essential workers. Let me just say that 1 out of 5 essential workers in America is an immigrant, including SEIU members and the 5 for 15 and the union workers. And we recognize the invaluable sacrifice undocumented essential workers make every single day to keep America fed, clean and running during this deadly pandemic. So we know that the time is now. The time to make citizenship a reality for millions of immigrants living on the edge. This is the time. Workers have done their job. In 2020, as you said, Kent, essential workers, people of color, organized and turned out in record numbers to win this election. And they have showed up through the pandemic, and they showed up in our polls to elect new leaders. So the time is now for the White House and Congress to get this done. And as Teresa mentioned, so we have some bills in Congress, 3 bills. One that would allow or provide pathway to citizenship for millions of undocumented people. One is, as you and Teresa mentioned, the Dream and Promise Act, the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, and the Citizenship for Essential Workers. And this, just remind you, these are the dreamers, the TPS holders, the farm workers and essential workers who keep our country running day in and day out. And we need to make sure that their work that they have done for us, for all of us, get recognized. Legalizing essential workers is necessary part of the COVID recovery, and we cannot beat this virus or have a true economic recovery when millions of essential workers are left out or living in fear for being deported or being separated from their families. So this is the time, and I think, especially as we look into the work that we do in SEIU, we're going to continue to do the approaching the immigration reform the same way we have approached the election or the 5 for 15 and the union or the long-term care organizing. We got to make sure that we are engaging and amplifying the voices of our members and the thousands of essential workers. And we also are linking arms because we know we cannot do this ourselves. We got to come together in a big movement, and we're linking arms with many organizations around the country. And Teresa mentioned that we are part of this coalition, We Are Home. This is a very, very a coalition that is bringing together over 100 organizations across the country, and we're building power and we to win for immigrants in this time. So we are here demanding that the White House and Congress do everything in their power to deliver citizenship for undocumented immigrants. This is, as I said before, it cannot be an economic recovery without them. And right now there is public support. Poll after poll shows that the American public support immigration reform. So we are here ready to do all the work that needs to be done. And one thing that we just gotta remind our elected leaders that we're watching, we're paying attention, and we wanna make sure that they deliver for us, or the next election we will remember.
Thank you, Rocio Sanz. You know, the path-breaking work that you did in organizing janitors here in Los Angeles rippled throughout the country. And the US labor movement is in debt to your work and to the new generation of immigrant workers who have been brought in wave upon wave based on the organizing culture that you helped to promote. And so that organizing spirit is continuing, because we are not going to win those bills in Congress for the Dream and Promise Act, for TPS, for essential workers, for farm workers, unless we organize and fight. And so I wanted to turn to Alexandra Sa, the director of the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance, who has worked with other worker centers, labor and community organizations year after year to mobilize for May Day, International Workers' Day. And why is May Day an important day for immigrant workers here in Los Angeles and across the country?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Ken. It's such an honor to be here with all of you, I have to say first. Well, May Day is important because May Day affirms workers' power and workers' pride. It's a day, International Workers' Day. It first started in Australia, as many of us know, and there, as in here in the US in 1882, May Day commemorates workers' struggle to establish the 8-hour workday. I'm going to say more about that in just a minute. May Day also commemorates immigrant worker leadership, because then as now, immigrant workers were central to advancing the front of the labor movement here in this country. It emphasizes the militant, active, fearless front of the labor movement. It reminds us that police violence has always shadowed us. Institutionally, the police have defended those with wealth and power, and not the workers and families who make up our communities. We see that today too often, as we did in 1882 when police fired on workers demonstrating to establish the 8-hour workday, killing dozens of workers. The 8-hour workday, it's a normal thing now, but it wasn't always that way. And it was the labor movement led by immigrant workers over 100 years ago who set the standards, who said, we deserve more, who transformed US law and US culture to the point where now it's just common sense that we have an 8-hour workday. Well, it was a labor movement led by immigrant workers that made that happen. And that's what we're celebrating. Pride is another really important piece of May Day. While we're often forced to face the difficulty, the insecurity, oppression, and vulnerability of workers, and especially undocumented workers, May Day emphasizes workers' power and workers' pride, because we fought, we won. The pandemic has highlighted the essential nature of so many jobs, many of which are held by undocumented or migrant workers. 2/3 of undocumented workers work in essential industries today. And we can't just say these workers are essential, but we have to treat workers as essential with dignity and respect. And on this May Day, one of the really important issues to lift up is the issues covered in the PRO Act, which supports the right of workers to speak out and build power, both those who have access to unions and those who do not yet have access to unions, which is still over 90% of private sector workers in this country today. Some of the provisions of the PRO Act would address misclassification when employers are telling workers that they're not workers. It would help to level the playing field that's unfairly stacked against workers who are trying to organize. It would address retaliation. It would reverse Hoffman Plastic, a really unjust court ruling, by allowing workers to receive back pay and reinstatement when an employer has violated their rights and retaliated against them, regardless of immigration status. And it would also strengthen retaliation protections by protecting workers during National Labor Relations Board proceedings. And this is so important because workers need to be able to come together, and their right to build power together needs to be uplifted and protected. And that's what we're here to talk about on May Day this year.
Thank you, Alexandra, for bringing the spirit of May Day into this conversation and for linking the fight of immigrant rights and labor rights. And the fight for immigration reform is also connected with the fight for the PRO Act and to defend workers' basic rights to form and join unions in a very unfair labor law situation that is dominated by corporate and Wall Street interests. Hugo, you've also straddled these two worlds, both the immigrant youth and immigrant workers fight, as well as at the LA County Fed with the labor movement. So what do you think the prospects are for passage of the Dream and Promise Act? And what are immigrant youth doing in the midst of this campaign?
Thanks, Ed. So I think Rocio earlier touched on it, right? It's about demanding from this Biden administration to really utilize every power it has to make this a priority and pass it. The Dream and Promise Act, for instance, has passed the House. Now it lies on the Senate. Like many things that we are discussing, the PRO Act, for instance, it's a priority in the US Senate. And so we have to utilize every ability we have to put pressure on those US senators, including abolishing the filibuster. But one of those items, to hone in on Arizona, for instance, where Mark Kelly and Senator Sinema we have to be willing to put pressure on them, because I will tell you one thing. It was not Cindy McCain's endorsement that flipped Arizona. It was immigrant workers, laid off workers that went and door knocked in the heat in the middle of a pandemic to ensure that US senators there were Democrats and went and voted for the things they demanded and the priorities for Senate. So as Rocio has mentioned, as Teresa, as Alexander have alluded, we will hold them accountable. And that's our ability as the labor movement to hold these folks accountable when they do not meet on these promises that immigrant workers have sacrificed for. And another item that's a priority, right, is when we're talking about these things, we know Republicans didn't negotiate on any of those things they passed, and they shoved things down throats. We certainly, as immigrant youth, certainly hope that in these items and these negotiations, there is not further criminalization of immigrants in the prospects at the expense of passing reform. So that is one thing that there's organizing around, is making sure that there's not further criminalizing of immigrants and communities of color in passing these reforms, Kent. So, you know, to your point, again, the House has passed this. We have to apply pressure to the US Senate, specifically in places like Arizona. We are phone banking into Arizona, calling union members to make sure that these senators know our stances.
Thank you, Hugo. So absolutely, this is an opportunity for us to exert political power, to demand accountability for those that got them elected. And the other thing is we need to challenge the Jim Crow filibuster and stop minority rule in this country to ensure that, in fact, there is majority rule. Teresa, the United Farm Workers have been at the forefront of so many heroic campaigns year after year after year. And that is continuing to this day. Essential workers, farm workers are being threatened. The risk to COVID, the risk of infection, and the rate of death is higher among essential workers like farm workers. It's higher among workers of color. So what is the United Farm Workers doing in the midst of the pandemic to fight for and to defend the rights of farm workers?
Thank you, Kent. And before I answer that, if I may, Alexandra spoke about overtime pay for workers after 8 hours a day or 40 hours a week. To this day, most farm workers do not get overtime pay after 8 hours. In California, we fought for many years, and now they have that right. We just won it in Washington, but other states do not have the farm workers don't have those same benefits. So I just wanted to add that, because it is not something that we dealt with in the past. It's something that we continue to deal with it today. And when it comes to COVID, Kent, you're right. Essential farm workers, like I said earlier, have been at the front lines and performing their duties day in and day out. Unfortunately, in many cases, farm workers did not receive the protective equipment that it was needed to protect their lives. And unfortunately, in many cases, farm workers did get sick, did contracted COVID. And although we negotiated with the governor of California that farm workers were going to be included in the paid sick leave if they contracted COVID, or if a family member contracted COVID, farm workers were not informed at the beginning of this, right? And instead, they would let go. And we have a social media where we reach out to farm workers, and we have about 50,000 workers that constantly are in communication with us. So we then decided to get donations, asked for donations for masks. And we got almost over 1 million masks that were donated to us. And then we distributed to farm workers that were not receiving any information, that were not receiving any protection equipment. And at the same time, together with our sister entity, the UFW Foundation, we provided in Central Work Kitchen with Chef Andres, we provided almost 200,000 fresh prepared meals to farm workers. Also, if you remember last year, the fires were very bad in California. So, and on top of the high temperatures, on top of COVID-19, workers were confronted with this low quality air that affected them, and they continue to work. Again, we got people who reached out to us, donated hundreds of thousands of N95 masks. And again, we were able to distribute them to farm workers. So it is an effort in something that we as the UFW, it's in front of us and we want to take care of. But I want to make sure that, we know that there's a lot of people out there who care about these workers and have come through with very generous donations so we can protect the workers. Like I said, without farm workers, we're not going to be able to eat.
Thank you, Teresa. And, indeed, you are carrying on the traditions of the UFW all the way back to the CSO days of
Yes.
community-based organizing and
Yes.
understanding the link between addressing the basic needs of our workers, but also organizing to fight for a better day. And that tradition continues. And so we're really proud of your leadership and the work of the UFW. Rocio, the organizing that you did helped to change the face of labor and continues to do so. What do you see as the organizing opportunities and potential today with regard to immigrant workers, and what can be done by the labor movement to step up and advance immigrant worker organizing?
So, you bring me back to the Justice for Janitors early day, that for me, it was so transformational and change in so many ways what I witness and I carry with me every single day, just to see the incredible resilience, the courage, the determination, when people come together, when they organize, when they have the collective power and the belief that they can change or make things better. It is just an incredible just to see that. And I carry that energy with me because this is kind of like what guides the work that I do when I came here to Boston, was the same thing. Immigrant workers, undocumented workers who organize, and in the early days with the Justice for Janitors, they were facing so many barriers. People told us immigrant workers, women, they can't organize, they can't strike, and we proved them wrong every single time. These workers were made the impossible possible in such an incredible way. And just mind you, these were the times where we have Pete Wilson and 187 and the very anti-immigrant sentiment in California, which is very different than what it is now. And just for me, that this is what it happened, and what it needs to continue to happen is when workers bond together, when they join together, when they they organize, that gives an incredible sense of the worker power. They can change, and have seen that again and again. I know that workers in this country are facing incredible challenges, and we know also that the rules are rigged against them. And, a Republican legislature, state by state, they're constantly attacking unions. And we saw this in, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with the Amazon warehouse in Alabama. And that underscored one thing that we need to do as a labor movement is, how do we change the structure? How do we unrig the systems that are stacked against workers? And, workers are making tremendous steps forward in these changes in social and economic transformation, in making sure that we make those changes happen. I'm very glad to see like the work that is happening within SEIU and with the labor movement, where workers are demanding to be respected, to be protected, and to be paid. And that was important and made a big difference in this election. We elected new leaders, and now we're expecting them to deliver. And there are a few things in front of them that will make a big change. Alexandra spoke about the PRO Act, and that we are expecting the Congress past that is going to be so critical for the same way that Alexandra just went point by point, how important that is. Just let me give you an example of how this is going to be transformation for many workers, and especially because it will get rid of the legal loopholes that allow corporations like McDonald's, just the way Alexandra just mentioned, who hide behind the responsibility through the franchisees to take responsibility on workers' lives. So that is one thing that is going to be important to be taken on by Congress. The next thing also that Congress needs to happen and us to continue to stay there and demand that is the passing of the President Biden's American Job Plan in full. Within that plan, just want to say that there are the $400 billion investment in home and community-based care that will create 1 million good union jobs with living wages and benefit workers, but also in a sector that is majority Black and Brown women and immigrants. So will be transformational for our communities with Black and Brown and immigrants live. That also is an important plan because also talks about how the right to have a union is so critical in it. So we are, in this moment, just to make sure that we are in all the different levels, lift up the voices of workers and just making sure that everybody understands that we're going to do everything, making the demand that workers deserve to be respected, protected, and paid. And we're not going to just rest until we see all of that.
Thank you, Rocio. Respected, protected, and paid. And those are such basic demands, but the reality is that millions and millions and millions of workers in this country lack that. And they lack it because of the bankrupt labor laws, and they lack that because of their status as immigrants and workers of color. And so I think that the link that you're drawing between the necessity of organizing, fighting, and building unions and organizing in the political arena to demand that those who get elected are held accountable to defend and protect the rights of workers. Alexandra, the Worker Center movement has organized workers in places where unions historically have not. And that's in immigrant communities, that's in certain sectors which unions have not been able to sufficiently organized. And you now are one of the pioneers in terms of a worker center representative on the LA County Federation of Labor Executive Board. So I want to talk about how we can build the alliances between unions and the worker center movement to advance organizing and what ideas you have to move this forward.
It's a great question, and I want to say I'm very proud to serve on the executive board of the LA County Federation of Labor. It's really an honor. I want to start by returning to the point that Teresa made about farm workers not having access to the 8-hour workday, because it made me realize that what I said made it sound like everyone has that standard. No, of course not. And that is exactly the edge, the battleground that we are all fighting on. So farm workers were excluded, domestic workers were excluded from labor law, and that is rooted in white supremacy, anti-Blackness, slavery, and patriarchy. With immigrants, whether it's Kiwa members who work in retail and groceries and restaurants and as gig workers, so many workers do not have an 8-hour workday. They're working way beyond, and they're not getting paid their overtime. Workers who are being told they're not workers by misclassification, they're not getting any kind of overtime protection. And the flip side of that is workers who are being underemployed. So workers who are businesses who are employing 2-3 times the number of employees they actually need, and workers only getting 15 hours, 17 hours, but being told, you don't know, you have to be able to take any shift, anytime. so they can't reasonably even get another job sometimes if they want to hold on to that one job. So all of these issues and the retaliation at the heart of it all, that is the edge that all of us are organizing around and fighting to change. The 8-hour workday as a standard, that is very important, but we've got to make that standard real for all of our communities, not just one small segment of the workforce. And that's why worker centers exist, because unions have a important, vital, central leadership role to play in our movement, and worker centers address communities, areas, sectors, jobs where unions can't prioritize at this time. It's not that people in unions don't care about it, but they can't necessarily prioritize some of the smaller businesses, some of the sectors. And that's why we need worker centers too, because worker centers can build power, can develop leaders, can organize in sectors and businesses where workers do not yet have access to a union, and in some cases can come together with unions to establish that power. And it's not an either or, it's a both and. We need to find ways to, I'm happy to be part of a coalition, the Coalition for Worker Power, that seeks to expand access to worker organizations, both unions and worker centers, because we need to get more workers involved. Poll after poll says that workers want to be part of unions, want to be part of worker organizations. We've got to make that possible. And that's what I'm proud to do here with our worker center allies and union allies.
Thank you, Alexandra. And that alliance between unions and worker centers has had a huge impact. The work together on wage theft, the work together to demand the $15 minimum wage came as a result of a broad-based alliance between unions, worker centers, community organizations, faith-based groups, all coming together to fight for and win the $15 minimum wage, which spread to the state of California and spread throughout the country. So the fight for 15 lives on, but it's a representation of the power of that alliance. Hugo, the LA County Fed has emerged as one of the most significant political forces in the state of California. It is no accident that California is a blue state. It is the work of unions in the state of California that turned California blue. What do you see as the role of the LA County Fed and the labor movement in using its political force in the fight for immigration reform, and how can we make that a reality?
And a lot of that political power that you mentioned came from the organizing of immigrant workers. And, I'm in a webinar in a room right now with 3 historic leaders who have been at the forefront of organizing immigrant workers, who have built and empowered themselves for political power, for advocacy, and all that strengthens the labor movement, right? So just to go back, the labor movement, as you know, Ken, was not always embracing of immigrant workers, and I'm proud to be of a federation that helped change that direction in the 90s and 2000s. And that came as a result of folks believing that organizing immigrant workers could be possible. And that in turn turned into them phone banking. Mike Garcia, famously just used to tell me, those folks, though they could not vote, they door knocked, they phone banked, and they did a bunch of stuff to flip the script here in Los Angeles, which in turn flipped California, which in turn has flipped the country. And, proud of the work that's been done, and President Herrera continues to prioritize immigration today. And, some of the work immigration reform is at the forefront. We're continuing to fight for it and we'll push the Senate and help the Arizona AFL-CIO, and for instance, in making sure we do our part from Los Angeles to flip Arizona. But we're also very active in doing stuff for immigrant workers in the immediate, right? Supporting things like the Garment Workers Center bill and SB 62, where garment workers, many who are immigrant women, are being exploited in the garment industry. And what we can do here in Los Angeles as the LA County Federation of Labor to support those immigrant workers, what we've done with the right of recall, supporting the efforts of Unite Here, for instance, in their passage of the right of recall to statewide, which was just signed by the governor, and the fight for minimum wage, in providing and helping, the farm workers with PPE when there was little access very early on in the pandemic. And that's stuff in the immediate that the Federation is very proud of and supportive of that we can do, Kent.
Thank you. And we were counting on that political force of the LA County labor movement to once again play a leadership role in the fight for immigration reform. And we've seen how what's emanated from Los Angeles has really changed the national labor movement with regard to their position on immigration reform. And similarly, what the LA labor movement can do to challenge other central labor councils, other state federations, other unions to embrace the fight for immigration reform. Teresa, the United Farm Workers has pioneered so many things on the philosophy of nonviolence, on the use of the boycott, on the use of labor and community alliances, on activating students and young people to join the boycott, to join the movement. And there's a long and proud tradition of how the UFW has spearheaded approaches to organizing that have now been embraced by the rest of the labor movement. So looking forward, what do you see as the UFW's challenges in building worker power under very challenging and hostile circumstances with a very powerful corporate America that has only enhanced its wealth during the pandemic?
Thank you, Kent. And before I move on with that, I also wanted to recognize that LA County Fed and Ron Herrera were the first people who stepped up and during the fires were able to get us hundreds of thousands of N95 masks to protect farm workers. So that's what the labor movement does, and that's how we help each other. But in response to your question, Kent, it is very difficult in many cases for farm workers to organize. There's many challenges that they have, one of them being undocumented. So that is, as I said earlier, working with the We're Home Coalition, who the SEIU is part of. That is one of the at the federal level, the most important things that we're working with. But at the state level, what we're trying to do right now, and it was just introduced a bill that is, we're calling the Agricultural Labor Relations Voting Choice Act. The ability, and we have seen it in the last elections, when we vote for our elected officials at the city level, state level, or federal level, the more options we have, the more participation there is. And we saw it in the last elections. So what this bill is calling for is just to update the way farm workers vote. When the Agricultural Labor Relations Act became law in 1975, farm workers were, for the first time, able to organize and vote for our union representation, but they would do it in person only. So, and since then, that's the only way that farm workers can vote for union representation. So this bill is going to make it to mirror how we vote for elected officials, where farm workers are going to would have the opportunity to vote in person if they want to mail their ballot if they want to ask for assistance completing the ballot, or to ask for somebody to drop it off for them. If it works and if it is good enough to elect our representatives at every level, it should be enough to farm workers to choose union representation. We have been filing at the end of the Trump administration. Unfortunately, we had to file lawsuits because he wanted to lower the pay for guest workers under H-2A visa, which would have impacted domestic workers. He wanted to suspend the order to suspend the Department of Agriculture's biannual farm labor report, which sets the minimum wage for our guest workers, which protects also domestic workers. Fortunately, we were able to succeed because if we had not filed lawsuits and fought that, it would have cut pay for farm workers in California by 5%, 20% to farm workers in Oregon, and by 46% to workers in Idaho. And as it is, these workers are seasonal workers. They don't make a lot of money, and he still wanted to make sure that the pay was cut. We succeeded with these lawsuits, and we will continue to do that. We don't see this happening with this administration, but those are the things that we continue to do to protect farm workers, whether they have a union contract or not. Everything that we do benefits all farm workers.
Thank you, Teresa, and once again for linking the impact of organizing and political mobilization. And we are counting on the United Farm Workers to lead the charge in the Central Valley, to flip the Central Valley and to get rid of some of the pro-Trump, white supremacist, pro-corporate forces in the Central Valley. The entire country will benefit when that happens. We have just a few more minutes, but I really wanted to wrap up with an opportunity for our speakers to talk about a call to action. We are coming up to May Day. We are coming up to an incredibly busy time for us to be able to make some meaningful headway in the fight for immigration reform, in the fight for worker justice. So I'm going to lead off with Rocio. What are you encouraging the people who are viewing and listening tonight? What concrete things can they do, can they take up to help to get involved in the struggle?
Well, so let me just say, I think this is important that we amplify our voice. There are many ways that we can do it by just joining the strength in numbers that we have, the power in number. So now, May Day, in many cities around the country, there are going to be actions. Join those actions, whether just making sure that you do it with, safely, or joined some of the Zooms, some of the phone calls. You need to make sure that all the elected leaders at the federal level or state level, they hear from you. They need to understand that you are paying attention, that you are going to make sure that they deliver for our community in many different ways. That is one thing. Two, also remember, this is have the longer view. So it's important that we also continue to increase our civic participation here. So making sure that all folks understand that we gotta, register to vote, and making sure that they know that you're going to vote, that you're paying attention, and when the election comes, that you're going to deliver for people who stood in the side of us. And just, there are other ways. I mean, there is a list of things. I think there is a website from SEIU, and probably folks are gonna be giving your SEIU.org/Mayday. You can go there and you can see different activities around the country in many different ways that you can join in.
Thank you, Rocio. And for the more than 30 years that I've known you, you have always put out a call to action, and people have always followed. So thank you for being here. Alexandra, call to action. What do we need to do?
Yes, I wanted to add to that. I totally underline what Rocio said. And in addition to that, we need to, on May Day and every day, organize. We need to organize in our workplaces. We're seeing this unprecedented level of anti-Asian, well, it's not unprecedented, unfortunately, anti-Asian violence has actually been going on for a long, long time, as well as all the violence and police violence against Black and Brown communities and injustice in our workplaces. The answer to all of that, we need to organize. We need to organize across races, across ethnicities. We need to bring more Black workers into all our workplaces, organize workplaces where Black, Asian, and Latino workers work, and fight together. Because it's when we build those unions, when we build those worker committees, when we build those actions together, that's how we fight white supremacy, and that's how we win.
Thank you so much, Alexandra Sa. Teresa Romero, what's the call to action? What would you like the people who are viewing tonight to do?
Kent, right now, like I said, immigration reform for us is key. It's the fight we're fighting right now. So I would ask all your listeners to call their senators and ask them to support the Dream and Promise Act, TPS, and Farm Workforce Modernization Act. These workers, these people deserve to be able to have a path to citizenship. And also, you know, if you go to ufw.org/UCLA, we can you can sign up, and we will keep you updated on the next steps to take on the fights that we're confronting. But it is important that young people get engaged, young people get involved, and that their voices are heard. They are the future of our country.
Thank you so much, Teresa. And so please check on the UFW webpage, the SEIU webpage, Kiwa webpage, and I'm going to turn it over to give Hugo the last word to talk about where we're going to be marching on Saturday, May 1st, here in Los Angeles. Hugo Romero.
Okay, so agree with what everyone said. And, you know, just touch on what Alexandra mentioned earlier, the PRO Act. You know, the PRO Act is very critical for workers across the country. And really it touches on many of the things that are dear to us, right? When you talk about Black workers, for instance, and their access to the middle class, it has been union jobs. The pay gap, the gender pay gap, unions have helped close that. And immigrant workers, you've heard it all tonight on what role unions have played in organizing immigrant workers. And the PRO Act, for all the reasons Alexandra mentioned earlier, really helps us achieve a lot of that work. This Saturday, May 1st, we're going to be at the LA Historic Park, not MacArthur Park as has been done in the past. So you can find it on Facebook, May Day 2021. The theme is The Work Continues, La Lucha Sigue. It's going to be a caravan/march. For those that are comfortable marching, you can march. For those of you that still want to be in your vehicle, you can be part of the caravan, but there's a space for everyone. So we'll be starting there promptly on May 1st at 10 a.m. So we're very proud to be part of this coalition with Chirla and Kiwa and everyone else that's been, a lot of our affiliates and SEIU are part of this coalition. So we're very happy to support it and hope folks can join us out on May 1st at LA Historic Park. Again, part caravan, part march, whatever you're comfortable with. But I, for one, am happy to be marching again.
Thank you so much, Hugo Romero from the LA County Federation of Labor. Thank you, Rocio Saenz from the Service Employees International Union. Thank you, Teresa Romero from the United Farm Workers of America. Thank you, Alexandra Suh from the Koreatown Immigrant Workers Alliance. We will see you all marching on May Day, International Workers' Day. Join us next month on May 27th, Asian Pacific Heritage Month, for a labor's voice on anti-Asian violence. So join us on May Day, and we'll see you next time on May 27th.